Hög av serier med Anders Lundgren och Freddie Kaplan.
The one, the only, and you will get to know her, you will get to love her, Cecil Castellucci.
Woo!
Okay, thank you for gracing our festival with your presence, Cecil. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here. This has been like a long time in the making, and I've come to really love Scandinavia, and so it's a real thrill to be here at this festival.
Yeah, many years in the making, as you say. We met at Thought Bubble in Leeds back in 2016, I guess, right? Introduced by Paul Cornell, so a big shout out to that beautiful guy for making us acquainted. And then we had you over here in 2018 for a signing, and signing with a lot of cookies from the Canadian Embassy. So thank you, Canadian Embassy, for that. Yeah. My sugar high is
still
eternal after that afternoon. So yes, where do we start, Cecil? You've done so many things. So where do you want to start?
I don't know. I can.
I know where we can start.
Yeah.
I have prepared myself because we've interviewed you several times, and the last time wasn't that long ago. It's like August?
Last summer.
Yeah.
For the book I think you see on the screen now, Shifting Earth.
And then we talked about lots of stuff, and then we talked about your upcoming stuff, which was a long list. What amongst one was like a World War One influenced opera.
No, book.
Book.
Yeah.
But you also did an opera called House on Fire.
That's coming up.
You were working on it, and the most interesting point was you weren't sure what it was about.
Yeah, I'm still not sure.
Okay.
No, I do know what it's about. So House on Fire is going to be an opera that's going to... I write operas as well as comics and novels. And oftentimes with my operas, I combine comics and opera to make graphic operas. Because I find that opera is very difficult to understand a lot of the times. And so I thought that having sequential storytelling with an opera, you'd be able to understand the story. So I think part of the reason why I'm like, I don't know what House on Fire is because I'm still trying to figure that out. But it's going to be in Belgium in 2025. In Brussels, it's going to have its premiere. And I've written half of it. And right now it's about... two kids who are facing what they think is the end of the world, but what you find out is that it's different times in history. So like Krakatoa, the year without summer, or whatever, and then all of it will culminate with with climate crisis. So that's what, and sort of them having operatic duets about what can we do.
Nice.
So that's that.
Cool.
And the World War I thing is actually part of this trip.
Yeah, so after I leave here, I'm going to Bolton, United Kingdom, and to London, to the Imperial War Museum, to research this soldier that I've been following for the past few years. It's going to be a novel about this soldier who's completely forgotten, but I found his picture. So it's going to have a comics element in it, in the sense that I have been starting to commission comic book artists to draw his portrait in their style, because I can never know who this man was, and I feel like a portrait that's drawn sort of reveals something about the character. So right now I have Jose Piamenta, who did Soupy Leaves Home with me, and Jim Rugg, who did Plain Janes with me, he's done one. This very famous rock poster guy, Pat Hamu, he's a Canadian. He does all the rock posters. He's done one. Becky Cloonan is going to be doing one, Tula Lotte. So there's a whole bunch of people who are signed up to do them. And then I'll also have some silent comics in it. But it'll be a novel, so it'll be a hybrid book.
Cool.
I think. I mean, I'm working on it. I don't know. This is the thing. What are you doing in the future? stuff, but also I don't know.
Okay. Yes, well, that leads me into another one of my questions, because I know we've discussed this before, so this is kind of a follow-up where we've compared you to other guys who write comics, and some of them I'll just make shit up, and you are of the other variety. You like research.
Oh, yeah.
So, let's talk a bit about that process.
Sure.
Yeah.
So even with Shifting Earth, I did some research. So Shifting Earth is it's a sci-fi graphic novel about a botanist in near future Earth who, everything, we didn't do anything right. So everything is going very poorly, and she's trying to rewild, find seeds to rewild our planet. And through a freak accident, she gets pulled over to a parallel Earth where they have 2 moons, so they have more water, and so they've developed differently. So they have more sustainable ways of living on that Earth. And they have all the plants that are resilient that we could use over here. And she has to figure out how to get home and whether or not it's worth coming home, or if it's worth sort of starting anew on this other Earth that's going through its own problems, Yeah. So for that, I talked to a botanist who specializes in finding wild varieties of cherry trees in the United States, to kind of be able to introduce new genetics into, to make more resilient cherry trees. So that was really helpful. And then also because I have this freak particle storm, I talked to an astrophysicist about how could I make a wormhole where,
Okay.
And he was like, well, maybe not really at all, but it was fun to talk to him because that's the whole point of science fiction, is that if you talk to scientists, then you get sort of a basis of a real science, and then you can make stuff up, and that's where the fiction comes in. So I always call up scientists and talk to experts to try to sort of infuse some reality into my stories, even though then I throw most of it out.
Okay. Yes, but how do you go about there are of course pitfalls to a lot of research, but because we've all read those books and comics and seen movies where everything just stops and one character does a Wikipedia page.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the info dump.
Yeah.
So how do you go about avoiding that feeling when you write your stuff?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes you have to have an info dump because, you have to. I think the biggest thing about writing a book or writing a story, writing a film, writing a play, whatever it is you have to inform the reader or the audience how to read or to engage with that piece of work. So I often tell my students, you have to instruct your reader how to read the book so that by the time they get to the end, they understand sort of what the world building is in this, right? So if you have magic in your book, but you don't want to reveal that right away, you better have some hint of the magic on page 1. Otherwise, by the time you get to the end of the book and all of a sudden everything is magical, the reader's gonna be like, "What? I didn't know what kind of book I was reading. That you didn't set me up properly." So I do think that sometimes info dumps are important, but you got to fold them in sneakily.
Yeah. Of course, it's like I always say, it's execution.
Yes.
It's all in the execution.
Yeah.
Talking about writing, there's a saying that writers love to have written but hates writing. Are you one of those?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So what's your writing process like? Does it differ between, since you work on so many different projects, do like opera, there's books, there are graphic novels, there are single issue comics maybe with a different deadline.
Yeah.
Do you have a different approach for each project?
So I think when I write a novel, I usually know that I'm really going to write a novel if I've written the end at the beginning. So I usually write the last sentence or the last paragraph of a novel before I even start the book. And then I know I'm really going to write that book because I get a lot of ideas, but they just kind of, go the way of the wind. But if I write the ending, then I know that it's a real thing.
That's the end point.
And then it gives me something to sort of aim for, like it's a star to navigate by, so that I have like a rival destination. Because otherwise, you can start a book and be like, oh, it's going to go this many ways. And I'm not an outliner. I don't outline books.
Okay.
I kind of like have an idea and I start. So I need to have an ending so that I have somewhere. So the ending usually changes a little bit, but it's sort of like I'm just to the right or the left of that ending that I originally wrote. When I do a graphic novel, like an original creator-owned graphic novel, I usually know where it's going to end. Like, I'm going to go to the next slide. So the Plain Janes that I did with Jim Rugg, this is, it's 3 books, and it's about an all-girl guerrilla art group. And Jim Rugg and I, who is my collaborator on the book, we knew that we wanted book 1 to be about a bunch of girls who do these art attacks, and they're amateur artists, and they don't know very much about being an artist, but they just love it. And then book 2, we knew we wanted it to be about them sort of like figuring out how to work within the system and get grants or whatever and get sort of permission to make art. And then that's why I put it in air quotes, because nobody needs permission to make art. And then number 3, we knew that we wanted it to be them training, like learning, their craft. Yep. And then also having a disruptor come in and be like, well, you're the mainstream. Now you need to tear everything down and start again. So we wanted it to be the journey of an artist altogether. And we knew that from the very, very beginning of the book, when we had no idea if we were even going to get to do book 2 or book 3, but we knew where the story was going. But, obviously when you do something like Batgirl, which I wrote for a year and a half, you have no idea, because all of a sudden, James Tynion or, Scott Snyder or whatever, all the boys, they all have like a plan of what they're doing with Batman, and they've included Batgirl in there, and you have to change your whole story to go in with whatever event there's happening. So you can't ever have an ending or an idea, for that. So.
Yes, and comic scripts, or do you do any drawing yourself, like thumbnails or that sort of thing, or do you just write your script and get out of the way of the artist? How do you work?
So it depends. For my original graphic novels, when I'm working when it's going to be book length, I ask the artist what kind of script they prefer. Do they prefer full script, or do they prefer open script? And then I accommodate the artists that I'm collaborating with, because we're a team, and that way we can have a conversation. I don't do thumbnails or anything like that, but when I did Shade the Changing Girl, I'm going to go to the Shade the Changing Girl. When I did Shade the Changing Girl with Marley Zarconi, we had to come up with an idea of what this is a character from DC Comics that was originally called Shade the Changing Man, and that was created by Steve Ditko and then rebooted. Exactly. Hey. Love Steve. And rebooted by Peter Milligan for Vertigo Comics in the late 80s and 90s. And then me and Marley rebooted it as Shade the Changing Girl for Gerard Way's Young Animal imprint. And Shade's superpower is madness, which means that everything is going sort of very psychedelic all the time, the hallucinogenic kind of book. And we had to sort of decide, what does madness look like? What is it? So Marley and I created a Pinterest page, a Pinterest board, where anytime we saw an image on the internet that we thought looked like madness, we would put it in there so that we had a shared vocabulary. So if I said and then this happens, we kind of had built this understanding together. So I don't do thumbnails, but ever since then, now I do a Pinterest board for all the artists that I work with, so that I'm like, this is what I'm seeing. This is the vibe of the city, or this is the vibe of the character, or whatever it is, just so that we can have a shared understanding of the look for the book, and then they don't have to. They don't have to do anything that's in there. It's just sort of so that they can understand my brain, because I think the hardest part when you're a writer and you're working with an artist is how do you spill the contents of your, brain and what you're seeing onto the page, but respect the fact that you're in collaboration with an artist who has their own way of doing things, and to be able to honor that, and to let that go, to give them their freedom to do what they want.
Yeah.
Nice. Sounds like a power up for as a writer. But since you've been a writer for you've been a long time writer, have you picked up any other cool tips and tricks? How have you evolved as a writer, would you say?
Jim Rugg, when I first started going from novels to comics, I felt very trapped by I loved comics, and I'd wanted to write comics for so long, but then when I finally got there, I was like, oh my gosh, because it was at DC Comics originally, we were required to do full script, and I was like, I couldn't figure out how to move the story forward panel to panel, and I called Jim Rugg up crying, and I was like, I can't figure out how to get out of the box, to the next panel, and he was like, Cecil, I am your swim buddy. Write whatever crazy shit you want on the page, and I will figure it out. I've got your back. And from that moment on, I started thinking of my scripts as sort of love letters to the artist. I'm only telling the story to them. So a lot of times, I'll put personal notes in there, hey, hey, Marley, I'm thinking this, something like this. But whatever you think, whatever you're in the mood for, whatever. And then I kind of overdo my dialogue, not because it's going to end up in the final comic, but because I like to have, I like for the artist to be able to really understand what I was going for, so it's kind of like a book just for them and my editor, I guess.
Oh yeah,
That person.
That's beautiful.
Really? How's working with an editor been for you?
I think editors are amazing.
Yeah?
Yeah, they're amazing. They know what they're doing, and they have the perspective. I feel like when you're an artist, sometimes you're so close to what you're doing, it's hard to, even though you think you see the big picture, sometimes you don't see the big picture. You give too much information or not enough information. You think people will be able to understand, or you do an info dump, and they really help to guide you to be able to tell the best story you can.
Great.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting, because now that we're on your DC stuff, you wrote Female Furies a few years back.
I'll do this.
And
see that? Yeah.
When Jack Kirby did the Miracle Man, that it's Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
That it's based on you jump off of one issue of Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
And he was his own editor, and maybe not always to his benefit, but most of the time it worked out.
I think everyone's different, right?
Yeah.
He had a vision. He was also drawing and writing, sometimes. So, he kind of knew what he was doing. But yeah, I think everyone could benefit from an outside eye, and I 100%. Who was the woman that Roz?
Roz, Roz was his editor on those books, I think.
So I think that the role, it's just having someone to bounce an idea off of, that I think is helpful. But yeah, the Female Furies, so that was, so Mr. Miracle, so Jack Kirby's The New Gods, there's an issue of Mr. Miracle #9, and it's where Big Barda and Mr. Miracle have their first meeting, and where they fall in love. And in that, there's this sort of very horrific story of this this female fury named Aurelie, who she fled the female furies, and then Barda is tasked with bringing her back, and something horrible happens to her. And so I decided with Adriana Mello to take this explode that story out into a 6-issue miniseries where it's a feminist awakening on Apocalypse. So it's like the Me Too movement on Apocalypse, the Hell Planet with Darkseid and sort of smashing the patriarchy and stuff. So so that was really fun. Yeah. So that was really fun. And it was when we did the trade paperback, I asked DC Comics to put the issue number 9 of Mr. Miracle on the back so that you could read Female Furies and then you could read the origin of where that came from, because, you know, there were a lot of bad people on the internet who said that I had never read Jack Kirby and I didn't know anything. And I was like, every line, everything is right here. Yeah. So I was like, you don't know anything about it. So, but
they didn't understand it even if they read it. So.
No, but I also think it's really interesting, especially when you're rebooting something or taking something and sort of altering it in some way, or expanding it in some way, to have the original source material so that you can really understand sort of the choices that were made and the sort of differences of what feminism looked like in the 1960s to what feminism might look like now.
Yeah.
Speaking about editors, how would you say, are you good at handling feedback?
Oh, yeah.
Because I found in my own life that handling feedback is a very important trait that you need in everything.
Everything.
And if you have a hard time doing that, everything gets very difficult for you.
So here's my rule, and this is also what I tell my comic students. When I get my notes, first of all, I tell all of my editors to say something nice. So I have first. So oftentimes, like, my editors, they might say, like, even if they haven't seen me, they'll be like, Cecil, your hair looks great today, or like what a nice sweater you're wearing, or whatever, or like, you're just so wonderful. And then they're like, all right, now get to work. Here's all the notes. Okay. So my sort of trick for notes is that I do all the ones that I'm like, oh yeah, that feels right. I'm going to do all those. And then the ones that cost me nothing emotionally, I do all those. And then the ones where I'm like, oh, hell no. Those ones, I usually find that what the actual problem is not the note that they're giving me there. It's something is wrong in the story either earlier or later. And if I address all the notes that I'm okay with or that don't cost me anything, usually I've fixed the problem. Because the notes are just when the editor or your reader, right, they're removed from the moment. Like, they're removed from the flow. It's like a hangnail where they're like, whoa, they're pulled out of the story. So that's sort of like what I do. I mean, unless it's like a big argument, I keep getting the same note over and over again. Then I'm like, okay, maybe I need to put my ego aside. But sometimes I'll cry, for a day or two. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, this is too hard. I can't handle it. And, I take a couple of days off, and then I take a walk, and then usually or wash the dishes or wash my hair, and it starts to stitch back together.
Maybe it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned your students, because you have another gig as well in Denmark, right?
Yeah. I teach at the animation workshop in the graphic storytelling program in Viborg. I do a 2-week workshop. I've been doing it now for 6 years, so I'll go again in October, and it's amazing. It's an amazing school.
How many students are there in one of those classes?
There's about 20 students, and I'd like to give a shout out to one of my students who's here, on the 3rd floor in I think 26. And her name is Irma Van Poel, and she's great. She does this cool embroidery stuff. So I'll show it to you later. There's a
Go check it out.
Yeah. So shout out to Irma. And also another student of mine, Annike, is having an internship here. She's graduating this year, and she's having an internship here in Sweden.
So you're keeping track of all your alumni?
They all become like great friends for life. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, speaking of for life, you decided pretty early on to become an artist. And would you like to go back to the very beginning? Let's talk about when did you decide to become an artist? Was a movie maker from the
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I decided, here, I'll go back. Can I go back to that one? How does that go? Oh, yeah. So Girl on Film. So when I was little, I saw Star Wars, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be the world's greatest filmmaker. And every single choice that I made as an artist, like to become an artist, was to be a filmmaker. So, like, I went to a high school of performing arts for acting to become a better actor's director. I went to film school. Like, every choice was for film. But then I ended up completely sideswiped. First I was in a punk rock band, and then I became a novelist, and then I did comics. And so, that was my origin story.
Yeah, that's very succinct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I think it's like that's what happens, right? Like art kind of, you decide that you're going to become an artist, and you think you're going to be one thing, and then art is like, ooh, we got you. Okay, we're gonna send you this way, and
Okay.
if you follow that flow, you end up having an art life. And, it doesn't mean that, I don't know, maybe someone will make a movie of one of my comics, so then I'll be in movies, so
yeah.
it all works out in the end.
Yes. And one kind of peripheral question there, but you describing a Girl on Film, how you used to go to see your favorite movies, and then you just your mom or dad dropped you off at the movie theater, and then you stayed inside watching them over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's so fascinating to me, because I know, when the movie's over, they kick you out and you have to pay again. But for how long could you do that? Remain in the theater and
Yeah,
see it?
it was pretty great. I would go, my mom would drop me off at like 9, 10 a.m. I'd go to the first screening, and then I'd sit there. She'd pick me up at like 9 p.m. I'd just sit there all day and just watch
That's insane.
the movies over
beautiful.
and over again. I just saw someone on Twitter was like, there was one of those things going on, and it was like, how many times have you sat in a movie? How many times have you seen this one movie over and over again in a movie theater? And people are like, oh my God, I've seen this movie 6 times. I was like, 6 times.
That's one day.
6 times. Yeah, exactly. I was like, if I were to count up how many times I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's probably 300 times in the movie theater. So it's like,
That is insane.
yeah. It's like, that was a big year for me. But that's what I like to do. I liked movies. I liked stories.
Yeah, and speaking of Twitter and movies, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Yes, about your long-running project of watching a lot of Disney movies.
Yeah.
Of course, how far have you come?
I'm on film number 236. The next one is coming up is Toy Story 2.
Oh.
I'm in 2000 now, or 1999.
Wow.
So my pandemic project was, I was like, okay, how can we make the pandemic a performance art piece? So
Okay.
I decided.
Many people did.
Yeah. So I decided to, as my thing, I would watch every single Disney movie, every single theatrically released Disney feature film in order. So I started on April 8th, 2020, and I've just been watching them. And then I live tweet it whenever I watch one. Obviously now it's going a little slower because, but then at one point I was like, well, when do I stop? Do I stop when I get the vaccine? Do I stop when the pandemic is like when? And then everybody was like, just keep going.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have about 300 more to go.
But
Yeah,
300, that's
it's
you
a lot.
get your work cut out for you.
I do, yeah.
Really?
But it's really fascinating because to see a studio sort of find its voice and then lose its voice and then find it again and then lose it again is it's pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, now I have like a few films where I'm like, they should reboot this film.
Yeah. What are some hidden gems there that we reboot or re-release this one?
I think Jessica Chastain is actually doing it, but Flight of the Navigator, It's like a sort of weird time travel one.
Yeah,
And then I'm very fond of Blackbeard's Ghost, which is totally wonky and weird. And then the Gnome Mobile. Yeah, I know. That's pulling deep.
Wow.
Right, yeah.
The Gnome
But I feel like it's got a good, sort of climate crisis vibe to it. And I feel like they should redo it, so. Yeah.
Yeah. And around 2000, you were a novelist, right?
Yeah.
Would you tell us about your text
Let's see.
books that are all text and no
Let's see. Where are
comic
they?
stuff in it?
Oh,
They're
is
all
that on?
certainly
Yeah, Boyproof.
comic related, you might say, in theme.
Yeah, so Boyproof was my first novel. It came out in 2005, and it's about a girl who's obsessed with Vertigo Comics at DC Comics and dresses up and post-apocalyptic science fiction films. And she dresses up as the main character, basically cosplays and goes to school every day. And she hates everyone. She's boy-proof, teacher-proof, life-proof, everything.
Yeah.
And she meets a guy. A new kid comes to school who wants to draw graphic novels, and they form a friendship. And then Don't Cosplay with My Heart, which is the last novel that I wrote, but not the last novel I'll ever write, is about a girl whose father gets arrested for a white-collar crime, and she doesn't know how to handle it. But it was at Free Comic Book Day, she became obsessed with this character called Gargantua, and so she starts dressing up. She starts doing cosplay and going to Comic-Cons, and that sort of becomes her shield to be able to deal with her trauma. So, yeah. So not all of them, but a lot of them have comics in them. Yeah.
You did a project featuring a Critical Role character.
I did.
Yes, and it has come out now, right?
Yes.
'Cause when we talked about it, was still in the making, I think, and it was Anton isn't here, who's the Critical Role expert, but he was very excited about it, and I was wondering if you've heard any feedback about if it's out. Have you heard about any? Because since they have a very rabid fan base.
It came out. I think people have really loved it. Yasha is so I did the origin story for Yasha Nadoran, and Yasha basically in the game is she's lost her memory, something traumatic happened, she doesn't really speak a lot, she doesn't really remember a lot of her past, so it was really fun. It was kind of a blank slate in terms of a character, and so I got to work with Ashley, the actress who plays Yasha, and we kind of crafted, she had some ideas about what she thought had happened to Yasha, and then we kind of she gave me notes of what she thought, and then I got to sort of cobble something together, and I'm really proud of it. And Will Kirkby did the art, and it's really beautiful, and and it was really fun. And my goal was that someone who's never watched Critical Role could read the book and get a story, and not have to watch the 700 hours of Critical Role.
It's a lot.
I don't know that it's 700 hours, but it's a lot of hours.
It's probably more.
Yeah, you're right. It probably is. And so I had my dad read it to see whether or not my dad, could understand it. And he was like, "Oh, this is a very interesting story about someone dealing with their trauma." And I was like, "Okay, good. I did it." So
you can buy your own copy after.
Yeah, we have them
after
here.
This.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does your dad read all your stuff?
He does, and he sends me
text
reviews.
There we go. There we go.
And I post them on my on my Instagram, because my dad will be, he reviews. Like when I was reading Batgirl, he'd read every single issue when it came out every month. At the local comic book store in Montreal, my dad has a pull list, but it's just me. It's just,
great.
And he doesn't know to go to the comic book store, so they're very nice at that comic book store, Millennium Comics, shout out. They call my dad and they're like, "You, a comic book has arrived for you."
That's amazing.
Dad's like an 80-year-old man, goes over there. And,
I love that.
yeah, it's pretty good.
So you've written books, songs,
Yep.
operas. What's next? Gaming?
I would like to do. Yeah, okay. I took a class recently. I like to take classes, workshops to sort of hone my craft, and I feel like as artists, we're never done learning. And so, so I took a class by this this woman named Sheng Yin Yor, who she was just nominated. She'd done comics. I think it's like the Anti-Poe or something like that, and it was the name of her book. But she also makes games, and I had bought a game of hers called Amending, which is a solo RPG game of sewing. And so you had this grid and this map, and you had to put a button on one side and then put a button on the other side, and the map was a grid, and you would sew your way to make a repair with your friend that you had broken up with. And there were cards, and every time you hit the edge of a grid, you had to pull a card, and it was really wild and amazing and weird and sort of a keepsake kind of thing. And I got really inspired by that, and she was doing a class online about making keepsake games, and everybody in the class, they were very crafty. They were like, I'm a woodworker, I'm a knitter, I'm a whatever. And I was like, I know how to do nothing except make up stories. But it was really inspiring. So I think I have an idea. I'm not going to say what it is. For like a very simple game that could be fun and, whatever. So I might do that.
Exciting.
Yeah. And then I'd like to become a playwright. That's my new,
I knew we'd find a new thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I did get a little fellowship for Soupy Leaves Home, which is, let's see, I don't know where it is. Soupy Leaves Home. It's the second one next to the ducks, which is about a hobo. It's a girl who rides the rails as a boy, dressed up as a boy in 1932 during the Great Depression in America, and she hops trains as a hobo. And I thought, I'm not done with this story. There's something still here. And so I thought it would be interesting to maybe try to make that into a play. And I'm also interested, like with my opera stuff, where, like I said, I do graphic operas, to maybe try to make it into a comic book play. Like, what would that look like? So I'll show. Sorry that I'm like. So this is one of the comic book. No, that's not it. This is one of the comic book operas. So this was Les Aventures de Madame Merveille, and I had 4 artists, Cameron Stewart, Pascal Girard, Scott Hepburn, and Michael Cho, who did comic book art. And the idea was it was 4 movements, and it was a superhero comic, a romance comic, science fiction comic book, and a kids comic book. And each movement was a different, like kind of like when we go through piles of comic books and we move from one genre to another. So that was the first one that I did, and that sort of integrated the characters in there. And then the next one I did was hockey noir, because I wanted to do something that had a very bold visual element, like noir and noir posters and stuff like that. And also I love hockey, big hockey fan. And so so this one was sort of more like it was a story of a missing hockey player, and how this time the projections sort of like there would be tableaus, so it was kind of like the singers sort of became a part of the comic and then sort of emerged from it. So so I thought maybe something with Soupy Leaves Home could be there as well, like the idea of trains and a boxcar, and how a boxcar has sliding doors and that sort of things, like panels. I don't know. It's a work in progress.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, because you did a lot of theater when you went to art school. You went to Juilliard, a.k.a.
No, I didn't go to Juilliard.
You didn't? No?
No, I went to the High School Performing Arts.
Okay.
Which is if anybody here ever saw the movie Fame from the 80s, that was my high school.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, oh, my God, I wish I'd gone to Juilliard. Yeah, let's put that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, print the legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, you fell in love with theater.
Yeah. Yeah, I love theater. Like even though I don't speak Swedish, I'm like, oh, I want to go see Hamlet with a lady. Every time I go down the escalator, I'm like, I want to go see that.
Yeah. Hopefully they tape it and you can watch it later on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of taping it, the operas, I think we asked this before, but
Yeah.
is there a way to see them? Like,
Yes. I have a third one that's up online. It's called Metternich, about Princess Paulina von Metternich, which also had comics in it in a different way. And then Les Aventures de Madame Merveille, that one is on the internet as well.
So you can just search for it.
Yeah, you can search
You will find
for it.
something.
Yeah, and
Nice.
if not, there's definitely trailers that sort of show, like 7-minute trailers that show.
Great.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. But yeah, I plan on doing more.
And what are your upcoming projects? What's in the pipeline now?
So World
Since
War
you're
I
so
book
busy.
and the new House on Fire.
Yeah.
And then I have a new graphic novel called My First Monster that I'm writing right now. That's going to be in collaboration with an artist from England named Shaz Khan, and that's going to be out on Little Brown in 2025. And all right, I really like outer space. And so I applied to become a NASA Solar System ambassador, which is basically a citizen volunteer for NASA, where you can do like school visits to talk about space missions and stuff. But really, it's because I love space so much, so I applied to do that because I like talking about space missions so much. But I've done one so far, but I have this obsession now where I want to write an opera, aria, a duet, or a micro opera about every single exploratory spacecraft that NASA or the European Space Agency have done. So I did one with a composer named Rose Hall about the Parker Solar Probe, which is currently circling the sun to collect data for the sun. So that one's called Touching the Sun. It was premiered in January in Philadelphia. And of course, because I like comics, I commissioned Pia Guerrera, who did Why the Last Man, to do a three-panel comic of the probe so that people in the audience could see what the probe looked like and stuff. So my idea is that I'll do this will be a lifelong project, and I'll get comic book artists to do 3-panel things that'll be a part of the libretto so that they can be projected if anybody ever chooses to do it again, that there's this thing. So I'm always bringing comics into whatever I do.
We're happy for it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's beautiful. Yeah, well, how did you react when you saw those, the latest batch of photos of the black holes? And
oh my gosh, it's so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to have dinner with a black hole scientist in Copenhagen on Monday, tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's how excited I am.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty. Yes.
Yeah.
So, there were flares, or what was it that we saw last time?
I think they're
from the black holes.
hole. I think it's like eating something. Yeah. Yeah.
Chewing.
You know, they're hungry. They're black holes.
Is that how it works? Okay.
Yeah. So that's part of my upcoming project, and then also so I've done a couple of community events so far for with my volunteer NASA thing. I did I don't know if you have them here, but Girl Scouts, troops, they go camping and stuff. They have to get badges. One of the badges is a space badge. So I went and I helped a bunch of 8-year-old girls get their space badge, taught them about outer space. And then I did a school visit. I've done 2 school visits, so yeah, just doing things like that.
Cool. Yes. Would you want to go out in space? We're getting closer to commercial space flight, or is it like, no, I'd rather stay grounded?
If somebody wants to pay for my ticket, I'll go.
Price aside.
Okay.
Let's say price.
I'll go, but I'll be very scared and want to back out at the last minute. But I think, I'd have to go.
Maybe.
Even if that's how I went.
Did you go?
Not sure.
No, I don't see it.
No. Not sure.
mean, how about you would go to space if you could, right? If somebody's paying the ticket, why not? I mean, if that's the way you go, I mean, whatever. Right? Like, it's like, went to outer space.
Good point.
You know?
Very good point.
Yeah. Yes, well, speaking of space, you've written a bunch of Star Wars stuff. And that's a lifelong obsession, as we touched upon earlier. And so how did that come about, that you finally got to... The first thing was the Leia Moving Targets.
Yeah, book, novel,
With Phil Noto illustrations, right?
Yeah, Phil Noto illustrations,
Yes.
yeah.
And that's since being a lifelong fan, how that must have been kind of a milestone.
I mean, it definitely was incredible because I got an email and it was like, would you like to write a Princess Leia novel? And I was like, is this a joke?
So they approached you?
Yeah, I was like,
Wow.
This is weird. But it was real. And so I did it. And it was nice. It was right before, the novel came out right before The Force Awakens. So the beginning and the end tie into The Force Awakens, and then the middle is like a story between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Yeah. And then recently I've been doing Star Wars Hyperspace, and it's 12 issues with 3 writers. So it's me, Amanda Diebert, and Michael Morrissey, and we each got a different era. Like, we each have different eras, and they're not connected in any way. So I have Luke and Leia, Finn and Poe, Jabba and Greedo, like pre-Clone Wars, and then something that's I can't say yet because it hasn't been announced, but and then another thing that ties into Return of the Jedi, and so. All the stories are not in order; they're not in chronological order. But there's a common thread in all of the books. Okay. So if at the end you were to put it in the order of the going from the High Republic to now, you would see the sort of story of this one little thing that threads through all of our stories, and that was the really fun part to come up with, because it's fun to like write a standalone, for Poe and Finn. It's like, they have to go get some beef, basically. They have to go to a cattle, planet and get some meat because the rebellion has to eat, and so Leia was mad at, Poe, and so they have to go down there, and of course something happens and they're like on a train and suddenly things happen. And that's, it's super fun, but it's also more fun to add something that's like that threads all of the like from High Republic to to now to post Last Jedi all together.
Yeah.
That was really fun.
And is that an editor thing, or is that something that you collaborated on and drew up the 3 writers?
Yeah, so it was the 3 writers and us in meetings with Lucasfilm, with Story Group, and because you can't do anything in Star Wars without them, completely,
micromanaging.
Yeah.
Not micromanaging, but like they just have a vast amount of knowledge. I think what they do is really smart. Like, what they first do is they say, you have Luke and Leia between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. What's a story that you'd like to tell? Yeah. And then you're like, I want to do this. Yeah. And they're like, okay, hold your horses. But now we know which direction you want to go in. Now let's taper your idea down to something that we can put within our canon. And, because even when I did this Star Wars book, originally, they have to keep track of everything. So originally I was going to have the first meeting of Nine Numb and Princess Leia. But then Mark Waid did his Princess Leia comic, and they had already met, and mine was taking place after that. So then you have to adjust.
Okay.
So now they really have a group that talks to everyone to make sure that everything is in continuity.
A canon group.
Yeah, canon group.
Oh. Yeah, but it's interesting to compare the early Marvel comics where they were just going wild and doing.
Yeah, and Dark Horse too.
Yeah, Dark Horse. They were doing basically whatever they wanted, and some very interesting stories came out of that. But now there's some really good ideas floating around Star Wars as well, because they since they respect the artists, like they have the Visions TV series, for instance, they do like that. It's present us with your idea, and we will do the
exactly. We'll kind of figure it out. And like it's like one of the stories that I have is like not announced yet, but anyway, there's an engineer in it, or there's a guy that's in a cockpit, right? And so then Lucasfilm very smartly said, why don't you make him an engineer? Because that ties into the rides at Disneyland that kids and people have done, where they can be the engineer in the Millennium Falcon or whatever. And so that way that was really smart. It's like, oh yeah, I can make it. It doesn't have to be guy number 2 on the side. It could be an engineer, and then that's like
there's some substance there already.
Exactly. And then anybody, I mean, I don't know if you've been to Disneyland, but I live in California, so I have a pass, so I go to Disneyland all the time, and I try to be the pilot, but Yeah.
But it's as you can tell now when you listen to us talking, that it's so fun with your career as it's progressing, and you merge indie comics and big two type of material all the time. And do it. It seems seamless to me looking from the outside, but there's a lot of the time you see. Sort of like we've discussed, conflict between indie comics fans who kind of hate this big two and superhero stuff or Star Wars stuff and that sort of deal. But it's great that we have you as an ambassador, tying the world together.
Yeah, I think, I love indie comics so much, and I love doing creator-owned stories, but, I think the iconic stories, whatever fandom it is, those are the stories that are like in all of our like DNA of like why we like stories, why we like things, from childhood. And so it's really fun to play in those. I think I would be miserable if that was all I was doing, because there is such a tight grip on it.
Yeah.
But I think it's fun. I'm trying to do like a third licensed stuff and then 2/3 of my own stuff, like comics and opera and weird things that I want to do, to sort of nourish my art, my art heart, but then also be able to like have fun with the things that were the reason why I want to tell stories to begin with.
Yeah.
So.
And we have talked about your operas, but your music career we haven't touched upon so much. But isn't it like soon time for some major anniversaries for Nerdy Girl and
Oh yeah, actually, but it's Bite. Bite is my first band.
Bite, your first band, okay.
And Bite. So I don't know if you have Spotify or Apple Music, you can actually listen to my band's Nerdy Girl or Cecil Castellucci. But Bite, which was my first band, which it's like its 30th anniversary. But we only ever released a cassette. Because
those are in vogue now,
Yeah, because CDs weren't really a thing.
No.
I guess, or they just come out. CDs were new.
Yeah, and it was it was expensive to press them compared to a cassette.
We did a cassette and 1 7-inch, and so I've been trying to get the masters, so that so that I can put them up on
No, you should
Spotify.
re-release them as a cassette.
Yeah.
Well, I do. I want to re-release it as a cassette and as a vinyl album, and put it up.
Because people buy cassettes now.
Yeah, and I think it would be fun, and it would be nice to have like an archive of that.
Right? Of course.
Yeah.
And
there's still like 5 people in Canada who ask me about it every once in a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I gotta honor those 5 people.
That's at least 10 copies right
there. Yeah, and not just my dad.
Not just no. But what's the paper trail for you chasing down those master tapes then? How's that going?
Well, I'm trying, but it's the guy who has the masters. He's moved a lot, and so they're in a box somewhere, maybe in his basement. And I have a friend, Howard Billerman, who produced some big Montreal bands, and he's willing to remaster it for me.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I just have to get the
physical media.
physical media. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, what have we not touched upon, Cecil, that you want to talk about? Because I think we might be...
Nothing. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, yeah, questions.
Any questions? I like writing books. I like telling stories.
Yeah,
I like comics so much.
me too.
Yeah.
When you work with the operas, is it different composers that you use?
Yeah, so three of them, Madame Merveille and Hockey Noir and House on Fire, they're with composer André Richtik, he's Canadian, but he lives in Belgium. And then the other ones, Pauline von Metternich was with Charlotte Marlowe, and the first three space ones are going to be with Rose Hall. But that one, I want to do like three with every composer that I've ever met in the entire world. So composers, give me a call. So yeah, it's different. It's different composers. I mean, in a way, it's a lot like comics because you're collaborating in that kind of same way as with comics. And I think you learn a lot from every different person that you work with. Like I learn a lot about comics from every artist, and so it's the same with composers. So yeah.
Do you have any more questions?
Oh.
All right.
Okay, well, Cecil, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here in Stockholm, and
Thank you.
let's do this again
Yes,
sometime.
thank you so much for having me. I just want to give a real big shout out to the library, to the festival, to Ola, to
All the Olas.
Yeah, all the Olas.
Yeah. We have
Thank
many.
you so much. It's been it's really great.
Yes, and we're taping this, so tell if you have many friends who missed out and they will bug you about it. We will release it as a podcast because we are Hög av Serier, me and Freddie now, and so we're everywhere on social media almost. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter. Gmail.
Google and you will find it. Yeah.
If you want to look through any of my books, buy them. We're going to just be over there for a little bit, so you can come and see.
Yeah, come get a signed copy of.
Do you doodle when you sign?
I mean, I will, but I'm very bad at it.
Yeah.
But I can do a commission, sure.
Yeah, nice, nice.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Cecil Castellucci. A warm applause. Yeah.
Thank you.